Section 1. The Brink of Chaos. Operation Epic Fury. The date is February 28, 2026. A date that will be etched into history, not by celebration, but by the fire of conflict. In the pre-dawn darkness over the Middle East, the world as we know it is about to change forever. This is not a sudden escalation, it is a culmination. While cities across the globe sleep, their populations blissfully unaware of the precipice on which they stand, a military operation of unprecedented scale and consequence is silently set into motion. Years of planning, trillions of dollars in technology, and the political will of nations have converged on this single moment. It will ignite a powder keg accumulated for over 4 decades, a volatile mixture of revolution, proxy wars, assassinations, and a relentless nuclear ambition. The quiet hum of advanced stealth bombers, ghosts in the night, departing from bases thousands of miles away. The unseen flicker of missile guidance systems, locking onto coordinates that have been studied and confirmed by a generation of intelligence analysts. These are the only preludes to the storm about to be unleashed on a region steeped in tension and mistrust. A storm designed not just to wound, but to decapitate. This is not a drill. It is not a war game, not a simulation run in the sterile environment of a command center. This is the moment the world has long feared, the moment when the shadow war breaks into the light with blinding, terrifying force. First reports trickle in through scrambled, urgent dispatches, whispers from intelligence sources, panicked calls from regional observers. Fragmented, chaotic, almost too shocking to be believed. The initial reports are dismissed by some as rumors, as disinformation designed to sow panic. But the volume is too loud to ignore. Then, confirmation. News agencies flash alerts across TV screens and smartphone notifications, a digital tsunami of information crashing over a sleeping world. The headlines are stark, written in the brutal, emotionless language of breaking news. Their implications are terrifying. US-Israel launch, Operation Epic Fury against Iran. The words hang in the air, a declaration of war broadcast in high definition. Coordinated joint attacks are targeting the heart of the Iranian state, its nervous system, its ability to command and control. The official justification, delivered by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, is to remove an existential threat. The operation is designed to cripple Iran's military and nuclear capabilities with surgical, overwhelming force. The stated political goal, to allow the Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands, a line that will be debated for decades to come. But make no mistake, this is not a limited strike. It is a full-spectrum assault, a symphony of destruction conducted across air, land, sea, space, and cyberspace. Operation Epic Fury, led by the United States, leveraging its global reach and technological supremacy. Operation Roaring Lion, Israel's counterpart, executed with the precision and ferocity of a nation that believes its very survival is at stake. On the map, the strategy is clear. Red arrows show flight paths from US bases in the region and from Israel itself, all converging on Iran like the talons of a bird of prey. They target not just facilities, the cold hardware of war, but the very leadership of the Islamic Republic. The men who have wielded power for decades. Key military commanders of the IRGC, critical infrastructure that powers the nation, and the crown jewels of the regime, Iran's most sensitive nuclear sites at Natanz and Fordo. The initial shockwaves are not just physical, tearing through earth and steel. They are geopolitical, instantly redrawing the map of global power and alliances. They ripple outwards from Tehran, the political capital, from Isfahan, the military-industrial heartland, from Natanz, the symbol of Iran's nuclear defiance. The world awakens to a new and terrifying reality. A direct, open war between major powers is happening now, live on our screens. The international community is thrown into panic and disbelief. Emergency sessions are called at the UN, but it's too late for diplomacy. The time for talk is over. For years, diplomats worked tirelessly to contain the conflict, to de-escalate proxy wars, and to manage the delicate, fraying balance of power through painstaking negotiations and fragile agreements. In a matter of hours, All of that has been shattered. The work of decades, undone in a night of fire, the facade of deterrence, the carefully constructed illusion of stability has crumbled, revealing the raw, violent reality that lay just beneath the surface. The attacks are a gamble of monumental proportions, a strategic decision born of the belief that the risk of inaction had finally become greater than the risk of action. It is a roll of the dice with millions of lives, the stability of an entire region, and the global economy all hanging in the balance. Two questions dominate every newsroom, every government, and every household watching in horror. Why now? And what on earth comes next? Section 2. A world holding its breath. The immediate aftermath is a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and rampant speculation. In the digital age, information and disinformation travels at the speed of light. Social media platforms are ablaze with unconfirmed reports, grainy videos of explosions, and panicked eyewitness accounts. Official channels are eerily silent, creating an information vacuum that only amplifies the global anxiety. For hours, the world asks the same questions. What just happened? Who is responsible? And what comes next? As the sun rises on March 1st, the full, devastating impact of the initial strikes becomes clearer. The targets were not random. They were precise, strategic, and aimed at the very heart of the Iranian regime. Iranian state media, after a period of stunned silence, finally breaks its paralysis. It delivers a bombshell announcement that sends shockwaves not just across the Muslim world, but across the entire globe. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, the man who has stood at the apex of Iranian power for over 3 decades, has been killed. The strike targeted his private residence in Tehran, a symbol of his untouchable authority. For more than 30 years, his word was law, his authority absolute. He was the final arbiter of all state matters, from nuclear policy to military strategy. The strike that ended his life also claimed his wife, Mansoureh Khojaste Baghazadeh, who succumbed to her injuries a day later. The spiritual and political figurehead of the Islamic Republic is gone. A power vacuum of immense proportions has been violently torn open. Iran is suddenly leaderless at the precise moment it faces its greatest ever external threat. Constitutionally, the Assembly of Experts is tasked with choosing a successor, but this is a process designed for peacetime, not for the chaotic aftermath of a decapitation strike. In the interim, a leadership council is hastily formed, but the real power now lies with the hardliners, particularly within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. A 40-day period of mourning is declared. On the streets, genuine grief mixes with carefully orchestrated displays of national unity. But beneath the sorrow, a different, more powerful emotion is brewing. Mourning is quickly overshadowed by a burning, unadulterated rage. The response from Tehran is as swift as it is furious. The IRGC, now the de facto center of power, seizes control of the narrative and the nation's response. The promise of severe revenge is not just rhetoric, it is a declaration of total war, a vow etched in the fire of national humiliation. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, makes a move that energy analysts and military strategists have dreaded for decades. They officially close the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC Navy deploys a formidable array of assets to enforce the blockade. Anti-ship missile batteries along the coast, naval mines sown in the shipping lanes, and swarms of heavily armed fast-attack craft ready to intercept any vessel that dares to challenge the closure. This narrow choke point, at points only 21 miles wide, is the jugular vein of the global economy. Nearly a fifth of the world's daily oil supply passes through this single waterway. Now, it is declared a no-go zone. Over 150 massive oil tankers, each a floating behemoth carrying hundreds of millions of dollars in crude oil, are forced to anchor outside the strait. Their crews wait in a state of high alert, their precious cargo held hostage by the escalating conflict. The flow of global energy is choked at its most vital artery. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. Oil prices don't just rise, they explode, doubling in a matter of hours. The price per barrel surges past $200, a level once thought unimaginable. This isn't just an energy crisis, it's a full-blown economic heart attack. Stock markets plummet worldwide as investors panic. The Dow, the FTSE, the Nikkei all enter a freefall. The global economy, already fragile, is now staring into the abyss. But the Iranian retaliation is not limited to the sea. In the days that follow, a torrent of fire is unleashed across the Middle East, a meticulously planned operation codenamed the Day of Wrath. The scale is staggering. Over 500 ballistic missiles, many of them advanced precision-guided models. Naval missiles launched from ships in the Persian Gulf, and a swarm of nearly 2,000 advanced drones designed to overwhelm and saturate enemy air defenses. The targets are split with cold, calculated fury. Roughly 60% are aimed at American military bases across the region, from Al-Assad in Iraq to naval facilities in Bahrain and airfields in the Gulf states. The remaining 40%, a barrage of unprecedented scale, are directed at the Israeli homeland. Air raid sirens wail across Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem. Israel's multi-layered air defense network, the famed Iron Dome, David's Sling, and the Arrow system, springs to life. But even these sophisticated defenses are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the incoming barrage. The drones come first, soaking up interceptors, followed by waves of ballistic missiles aimed at military sites, infrastructure, and population centers. The Shadow War, the decades-long campaign of assassinations, cyberattacks, and proxy conflicts, is definitively over. This is open, direct, and brutal state-on-state conflict. And with it, the human cost begins to mount with horrifying speed. In the first 72 hours, preliminary reports paint a grim, chaotic picture of the casualties. In Iran, the initial US-Israeli strikes have reportedly killed over 1,000 people, with thousands more wounded, many of them civilians caught in the crossfire. In Israel, despite its sophisticated defenses, missile impacts have claimed at least 11 lives, with hundreds injured and infrastructure severely damaged. The toll among American service members begins to rise, with 6 soldiers confirmed killed in the attacks on their bases, marking the deadliest day for the US military in the region in over a decade. The conflict also spills over Iran's borders, igniting other regional fronts. Israeli retaliatory strikes on Hezbollah positions in Lebanon result in over 120 deaths. This retaliation triggers a counter-response from Hezbollah, pulling another nation directly into the widening vortex of violence and creating a new bloody front in the north. The region is rapidly descending into a multi-front war, a catastrophic chain reaction that threatens to spiral out of control. And for now, the world can only watch in horror, holding its breath. Section 3. The Path to War. Unraveling the Why. How did we get here? For decades, the world watched a simmering conflict fought in the shadows, a war of whispers, sabotage, and deniable attacks. Now, the whispers have become a roar. The shadows have given way to the blinding flash of open warfare. How did this undeclared Cold War suddenly erupt into a conflagration that threatens to engulf the entire globe, pulling nations into its vortex and putting the world economy on a knife's edge? The answer is not a single event, but a long, winding road paved with pivotal moments and fateful decisions. The answer is not simple. It is a complex tapestry woven from 3 powerful threads: history, ideology, and ambition. The history is one of ancient empires and modern grievances. The ideology, a revolutionary fire that sought to remake the Middle East. And the ambition, of leaders and nations striving for dominance in a region defined by conflict. To ignore any one of these threads is to misunderstand the crisis we face today. To understand the explosive events of 2026, we must look back, not just years, but decades, to the moments that set these 2 powerful nations on an irreversible collision course. The roots of this modern conflict stretch back to a single transformative year, 1979. A year that didn't just change a country, it redrew the map of alliances and enmities across the entire Middle East. It may seem unthinkable now, but before the Iranian Revolution, Iran under the Shah and Israel were not enemies. In fact, they were quiet, pragmatic allies. In the geopolitical chessboard of the Cold War, they found common ground, united by a shared suspicion of Soviet influence and the rising tide of Arab nationalism. Theirs was a classic, enemy of my enemy is my friend relationship. Behind the scenes, they cooperated on sensitive intelligence and military matters. Israeli advisors helped train Iranian forces. Iranian oil flowed to Israel. It was a partnership of convenience, a strategic calculation that served both nations' interests. But everything changed with the overthrow of the Shah and the dramatic rise of a new, formidable figure, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The revolution wasn't just a change of government, it was a seismic ideological shift. The 1979 revolution completely remade Iran's foreign policy. The new Islamic Republic was founded on an ideology that was staunchly anti-Western and virulently anti-Zionist. The United States, once a key ally of the Shah, was branded the Great Satan. And Israel, the Shah's secret partner, was labeled the Little Satan, a cancer in the heart of the Muslim world that had to be excised. Animosity became a pillar of the new regime's identity and a tool for exporting its revolution. The goal shifted from pragmatic coexistence to the eventual destruction of the Israeli state. This fundamental ideological clash set the stage for a long, deadly, and undeclared shadow war. For decades, the fight was indirect, a brutal contest of wits and wills fought through proxies, sabotage, and assassination. A war where victory was measured in secrets stolen and enemies eliminated, always with a veneer of deniability. Israel was blamed for sophisticated cyberattacks on Iran's nuclear facilities, like the infamous Stuxnet worm that crippled centrifuges. And it was widely suspected in the targeted killings of Iran's top nuclear scientists, a campaign of assassinations designed to decapitate its atomic ambitions. In response, Iran built a formidable network of proxy militias, its so-called Axis of Resistance. It armed and funded Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and cultivated powerful allied groups in Syria and Iraq, creating a ring of fire around Israel's borders. This deadly equilibrium, this violent but contained shadow war, was shattered by the convergence of two critical factors in late 2025 and early 2026. First, Iran's nuclear program. After years of sanctions, negotiations, and sabotage, intelligence reports indicated Tehran was on the verge of reaching a point of no return, the capability to produce enough weapons-grade material for a bomb in a matter of weeks. This was a red line Israel had sworn, publicly and privately, it would never allow Iran to cross. Second, at this exact moment of nuclear tension, massive anti-regime protests erupted across Iran, the largest in years. The government, seeing an existential threat, responded with a brutal crackdown. With thousands reportedly killed and the country teetering on the edge, the regime signaled a terrifying combination of instability and ruthlessness. For Israeli strategic planners, this was the nightmare scenario. A regime facing collapse at home, but on the cusp of obtaining the ultimate weapon. This toxic mix of nuclear ambition plus internal fragility may have opened a perilous, fleeting, now or never window for action. To truly understand the path to war, we must now examine each of these critical junctures in detail. The roots of the revolution, the Shah's twilight alliance, the revolutionary spark that transformed a nation, Khomeini's proclamation of a new enemy, the diplomatic rupture, the export of revolution, the birth of Hezbollah, and how the stage was meticulously set for a long and bloody shadow war that would inevitably and catastrophically break into the light. Before the revolution, Iran under the Shah was an unlikely partner to Israel, bound by a pragmatic, anti-Soviet logic. Known as the doctrine of the periphery, their cooperation spanned oil deals, weapons transfers, and shared intelligence. Yet beneath the surface, growing resentment at the Shah's autocracy and Western ties was quietly building. In 1978, peaceful student protests swelled into a nationwide uprising that toppled the Shah. Smuggled cassette tapes of Ruhollah Khomeini turned sermons into a revolutionary soundtrack as the monarch fled and the Ayatollah returned in triumph. By 1979, the Islamic Republic had been born, a theocracy that would remake the region. With the revolution came a new rhetoric. The United States, the Great Satan; Israel, the Little Satan. Diplomatic ties were severed. The Israeli embassy in Tehran was closed and handed to Palestinian representatives, and leaders like Yasser Arafat were welcomed as allies. Iran had pivoted from regional partner to principal antagonist in Israel's view. After 1979, Tehran set about exporting its revolution across the Middle East, a strategy visible on maps of proxy networks. The brutal Iran-Iraq war hardened the regime and elevated the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which funneled arms, training and funding into Lebanon during its civil war. From that crucible, Hezbollah emerged, Iran's most effective proxy, and the region entered a long, quiet shadow war of assassinations, sabotage, and deniable strikes. Beneath the headlines runs a covert campaign few see, Israel's war between wars, and a string of mysterious assassinations and detonations at Iran's nuclear sites. From cloaked operatives to targeted sabotage, these acts reshaped a regional chessboard. One turning point, Stuxnet, a digital weapon that quietly rewired centrifuges and opened a new front in modern warfare. For Israel, the risk was existential. Tehran's program crossed a red line. In 2015, the JCPOA promised limits and inspections, but its sunset clauses and fierce opposition from Israeli leaders left it vulnerable. When the United States withdrew in 2018 and sanctions returned, Tehran began edging back toward enrichment, unraveling the fragile agreement and widening the path to confrontation. Syria and Iraq became battlegrounds for influence. Iran dug in to secure supply lines and a land bridge to Hezbollah, while Israel struck relentlessly to blunt Tehran's reach. At sea, a tit-for-tat tanker war in the Strait of Hormuz raised global stakes, turning local strikes into a shock to world trade and energy markets. By late 2025, Iran convulsed. Mass protests filled the streets, and the supreme leader ordered lethal force. That brutality opened a dangerous, now-or-never window for outside powers. On February 28, 2026, US and Israeli forces launched coordinated strikes, a decapitation attack that killed Iran's supreme leader. Tehran retaliated with waves of missiles and drones and closed the Strait of Hormuz, plunging energy markets into crisis. The war spilled outward. Lebanon, Iraq and the Gulf were hit. Casualties mounted, over 1,300 dead in Iran and dozens elsewhere. Hospitals overflowed and millions fled, a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding. We face three possible futures. The unraveling, a prolonged, grinding regional war of attrition that leaves cities in ruins and generations exhausted. The brink, a dangerous widening as major powers are drawn in, risking global conflict. The faint hope, a narrow path to de-escalation born of mutual exhaustion, back-channel diplomacy, and humanitarian relief. Each path carries its own costs. The choices made now will shape the world for years to come. The story is far from over. The world holds its breath, waiting to see which future will prevail. The responsibility to choose the path of peace over the path of perpetual war rests not only with leaders, but with citizens everywhere who must demand a better way. The stakes have never been higher. Subscribe to Shalom Trends. Like, share, turn on notification for latest updates.